Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District Board of Directors meeting. It's Thursday, January 25th, 2024. Happy New Year, everyone. It is 5:32 p.m. and this meeting is now called to order. And would the clerk of the board please note attendance, indicating there's a quorum. And I do want to note that we have Director Carney joining us online, and Director Duncan is absent this evening, having a ton of fun in Disneyland instead of spending time with us. I think our promoter score is better than Disneyland, right? Or it was.
It is, still is.
So she should be here. We're having more fun. No. I'll turn it over to General Manager Pollock for our safety moment.
All right, thank you. In lieu of a safety message during the safety moment today, I thought I would ask Tom Dietz, our Chief Operations Officer, to give a winter storm disruption update.
Good evening, President Cherriots, members of the board. Appreciate the time in lieu of the safety message to talk about our Emergency Operations Center activities. We've had some weather a week ago or so. So we did end up standing up our EOC, or Emergency Operations Center group, on the 13th at the darkness of the morning to witness our weather. We did make very difficult decisions this past week by shutting down or suspending service due to the road conditions out there with the freezing rain. In total, we shut down for 3 complete service days and 2 partial days due to the weather conditions. A lot of praise and thanks to our Cherriots team and our MTM team for the work that was done in and around the storm events. I'll start with the directly operated group. So our facilities and maintenance crews were top-notch in clearing the sidewalks by looking at the cameras. Downtown Transit Center, Kaiser Transit Center, and the Del Webb operating headquarters was pretty much spotless as far as clearing the sidewalks and walkways in the parking lots, and making sure that we were ready for service, even though we did suspend service. So they did an amazing job in very tough conditions. When others weren't working, they were out there making sure it was safe for us to return to work on the partial days. On the contracted side, equal praise and thanks goes to the MTM team over there. They actually operated life-sustaining trips when we did not. So in all, they performed 152 life-sustaining trips during the days that we were either partially open or fully suspended. So those were individuals who had medical appointments or dialysis in particular that necessitated them to be transported. So in all, we learned a lot from our actions last year with the weather, and presented leadership with a number of options, erring on the side of safety, and that's what we did for both our ridership and our employees. So very pleased with how that went, and we'll be having an after-action review to discuss kind of what went well and what didn't. For any future weather that may come still. We have February to go through. So,
Great.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I mean, definitely kudos to all the teams. When a lot of us got to stay nice and warm in our beds, everybody was making some very tough decisions. I don't know if some board members want to say anything as well? No? Oh, okay. All right, so we'll move right along into announcements and changes to the agenda. And I believe Director Carney would like to make a change to the agenda.
Oh, sorry. I don't know that we need a change to this agenda. Thank you, President Hinojosa, because the change that I would propose would be that the Cherriots board consider a letter to submit to the Salem-Kaiser Area Transportation Study Policy Committee. But given that our next board meeting falls in advance of their policy committee meeting, I think that we can add that to the February agenda and consider the letter at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could also just make sure that we get it squared away ahead of time. I mean, up to you.
I'm certainly happy to add it to the agenda and discuss it this evening while it's fresh in people's minds. If that's a possibility, let's do it.
Okay, yeah, I think we can do that. Is that okay with everyone else on the board? Sure. Okay, all right, so we'll add that, probably right after our action item C?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll be action item D. All righty. Thank you very much. Any other announcements or changes to the agenda? No? Wonderful. Okay, now we'd like to move into some presentations, and this evening we'd like to recognize our advisory committee members for their time and dedication to our district. I see Lori Doherty from our Community Advisory Committee online. Sorry that we can't have you here in person, but thank you for being here in spirit. Okay, so first we'll start off, we'd like to present a recognition to our Stiff Act members, John Hamill and Emily Broussard. So if you could come up here and we can take a quick picture and get you your certificates.
All right, someone want to lead the way? Yeah.
So Maria is on your right-hand side.
Okay, there she
We'll just have her turn.
sounds good.
Hang on to this.
Okay.
We'll take a quick picture. And come on, over to the group. You're gonna stay up. There you go. If you wanna hang on to it and just snap a quick picture with our board secretary.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much.
Hang loose.
Emily, you can have a seat.
All right, and now we'd like to recognize our Citizens Advisory Committee members and that are here. So we've got John Hamill again and Rick Hartwig.
All right. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3. All right.
It's easy with wheels.
Okay.
When they don't take chairs from us.
Okay, I don't have a great mic, I'm just gonna try this way.
To your left, you might. Sharp, sharp. There we go.
I just gotta push it. I gotcha. Okay. And finally, I would like to present a recognition from our Special District Service Award, a nomination that was submitted for Ian Davidson. And we're getting a recognition for your continued dedication to the Salem Area Mass Transit District. So, Ian?
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us and celebrating some really important people to the district. All righty, now we'll move into public comment. And in-person public comment received, we've got Tyler.
I feel really stupid having to rearrange the furniture.
Oh, you're fine.
Anyway, it's been a while since I've been here. Good to see you, Director Carney. Hope everyone stayed warm and stuff during the inclement weather. And I earlier, but I wanted to applaud you guys for making tough decisions during the snow. I mean, I'm sure it was hard for everybody. We live in a day and age where everybody's got to have something delivered immediately, and when cars or buses can't move around, things come to a standstill. Me being me and my methods of transportation, wheelchair, bus, three-wheeled bicycle, I just stayed home. I got a freezer with food in it, was just fine. I'm glad that the power didn't go out. I mean, that would have been tough. But looks like everybody survived. Just stay off the road as much as possible. I personally didn't even go out on the Thursday when you guys were operating. I live, the end of my driveway coming to the street is pretty steep even on a dry day for my wheelchair. And then they didn't do any de-icing within the compound where I live. So it would have been tough just to get out to Silverton Road. So, you know. And then I figured every place where I would want to go would be either short-staffed or closed, so why bother? So, but yeah, I'm very excited to see the progress at Kaiser Station, and been going on there waiting for that to get done. That's super excited. And I was reading about you're working on South Salem, so keep up the good work. I think it's only going to get better, and I'm glad that things were pretty smooth considering this last, couple weeks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment online? No? Okay. Wonderful. All right, so we will proceed to item 5 on our consent calendar. Does any director wish to pull an agenda item? No? All right, so do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Seconded.
All right. And motion and a second. Any discussion?
I do very briefly.
Okay.
I learned my lesson last time when I didn't, and then I had to go back. I just very briefly wanted to highlight Steve Anderson's application for the STIF Act, as I have learned how to pronounce not 10 minutes ago. Steve Anderson is the land use chair of WSNA, and I worked with him some, and I think he'll be a great addition to that advisory committee. So just want to publicly say that.
Thank you. All righty. So are all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed? Seeing no opposition, motion passes unanimously. All right. Moving right along to our action items. So agenda item 7, action item A, adopt 2024 legislative agenda and board priorities and principles. So General Manager Pollock, can you please present the staff report?
Yes, thank you. So tonight we do have in front of you a request for the board to adopt the 2024 federal and state legislative agenda, as well as reaffirming the board's priorities and principles. So each year in January, we bring to you a legislative agenda that sets the direction for our legislative activities. We use this as a guide when responding to legislative matters and as a communication tool with legislators and other interested parties. In addition, this year, in discussion with the legislative subcommittee, we felt it an appropriate time to do an annual reaffirmation of the board's priorities and principles that serve as guide for board members as they navigate their roles representing the board as a whole, and empowers board members to speak with confidence on mutually agreed upon principles and priorities. On January 16th, the board's legislative subcommittee met to finalize the proposed legislative agenda. You have those in your packet as attachments A and B, as well as the board priorities and principles as attachment C. Before I provide a recommendation, I'd ask our CFM team to please come forward. CFM advocates are our legislative advocates at both the federal and state level, and we have representatives of both groups here tonight to present the federal and state legislative agenda. So we'll start first with Kirby Garrett from the CFM federal team, who's here virtually.
Hello there. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen here. Right. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, well, good evening. It's great to see everybody virtually. I wish I could be there in person. I actually had the opportunity to be back in Salem last week to try to visit with Alan, but it was poorly timed my travels in hindsight with the ice storm. So I just, to second, what everyone was talking about to begin this meeting, commend Cherriots as a whole and navigating that storm and making tough choices and providing service and getting that up and running as soon as possible, because that was a nasty storm and not fun to navigate myself. So anyways, it is a pleasure to be with you virtually again. As Alan said, my name is Kirby Garrett. I am a federal affairs partner here with CFM Advocates based out of our Washington, D.C. office. And as Alan said, it's my pleasure to present to you our 2024 federal legislative agenda that we've put together with your team and we'll be working on your behalf to implement this year. Before I dive in, I'll just give a quick overview of what I'll be talking about. Wanted to provide a quick recap of our successes over the past year and even before that as well. I'll just give you some context of where we stand on some of our projects. Then we'll shift gears, talk about the 2024 federal agenda and your funding requests and policy priorities. And then lastly, I'll wrap things up with a quick legislative preview of what is sure to be and has already been a very interesting year in Washington, D.C. So, all right, so this is a slide I always look forward to presenting. We are very, very proud of the success that we have been able to achieve working together with you all. And this is a true testament to your leadership as a board, your staff's ability to put together just very high quality projects that really reflect the needs of your community, and put together, working with us, strong applications and a strong advocacy to secure funding for some of these items. So won't go into each and every one of these, but just to highlight a few, at the top there, recap 2023 last year. So we were able to secure a low and no emissions grant award from the Federal Transit Administration for $6.6 million for 5 additional battery electric buses. Super exciting. We've just had a lot of success going after those buses in the past few years and taking advantage of historic investments here at the federal level. We also were able to secure $500,000 through the congressionally directed spending process, formerly known as earmarks. These are congressionally directed awards that members of Congress are able to advocate for and try to include in annual appropriations legislation. So again, we were able to secure $500,000 for the South Salem Mobility as a Service transit facility. And we are, so this is less than we requested, obviously, but given what a haircut most awards took on the House side, we were still very excited to achieve this award, especially because we were able to secure an award last year as well in the FY 2023 appropriation cycle. I will caveat things by saying that that 500,000 is still dependent on Congress fulfilling its basic legislative duty of funding the government each year. I'll get into that in a little bit, but they are still navigating that process and trying to figure out a way to finalize an appropriations bill. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the hard work of our congressional delegation, Senator Merkley, Senator Wyden, and especially for this specific award, Congresswoman Andrea Salinas, who really led the effort to get this in the House's proposal. So again, won't go into each and every one of these additional awards, but you can see the list there. Going back to 2018, we've been able to secure $29.5 million in federal grants and congressionally directed spending awards. That is at least one award per year over the past 6 consecutive years. So that is that's a record that, again, we are just super excited about. And, you know, we've been testament that you're making in our services. You can see there 60 to 1 for every $1 you've been investing in our services at the federal level. We've been able to go out and secure about $60 in federal funding back there to Salem. So now turning to the 2024 federal agenda, very excited to work off of our success that we had last year and in recent years. We're really excited about the agenda we've outlined. I think we've got some really high quality projects and policy priorities to go out and pursue. As Alan mentioned, every year we put together this agenda. As you can see, not only outlines the projects that we're pursuing federal funding for, but also your policy priorities as well that we'll be advocating for through the congressional appropriations process and any other policies that are moving forward at the federal level. So first one, South Salem Transit Facility. We know that's a huge priority of you all and a fantastic project that really is going to make an impact there. Again, we've been able to secure funding for kind of the pre-construction side, and now we know it's time to really get the big check for actually constructing this and getting this done. So we think that project is in a really, really good spot. We've had success through congressionally directed spending where we plan to pursue this again. It's hard to get back-to-back awards in general, especially for the same project. But again, this is a very compelling one. But we also think we've got a good case to make through the more traditional bus and bus facility grant program. So we'll be working with your team again to put forward an application for that project. I think, how far you all have moved that project forward on the pre-construction side will really help. FTA likes to see projects that are, have a high project readiness score and are, sort of shovel ready, so to speak. So we're excited to give that one another go. Zero emission buses will continue pressing for this as well, likely through congressionally directed spending, as well as the low and no emissions grant program through FTA. And then security enhancements is kind of a new one that we've added this year, where we are looking at likely a multi-pronged approach. When Alan was out in Washington, D.C. in December, we had the opportunity to meet with FEMA and TSA to sort of explore this program. It's something that Cherriots is not eligible for right now, but our understanding from our meeting is that even though you all do not meet the conventional requirements for that program, they have a little bit of discretion for who is eligible and able to apply. So we're working through that process, seeing if there's a way to get Cherriots on that list so you can pursue funding for security enhancements, fencing, et cetera, to keep your facility and your riders safe. In addition to that, we'll likely be looking at congressionally directed spending as well, since it appears to be an eligible cost that we could put forward. So we think we've got a good trio of projects there, multiple routes to pursue funding, and we'll be going full steam ahead. Since the congressional delegation on the Senate side, at least, has already initiated the congressional directed spending process for the next year, even though the current year isn't even over with yet. They want to make sure they've got everything lined up and are ready to hit the ground running. So policy priorities. So kind of on the grant funding side of things. So one of the big things we've been advocating for is continued plus-up funding for the bus and bus facilities grant program, competitive grant program. And the reason is, even though there was historic investment through the infrastructure program into that account, the demand for the program still far exceeds the resources available. Last round, there was $8.7 billion requested for $1.5 billion available in program round funding. So just a huge demand for even now a limited amount of resources. Part of that is due to cost and inflation and escalations. A lot of that is just there's a lot of need across the country that's pent up after years of kind of disinvestment before this bill and before the FAST Act before that. So all goes to say, we will be advocating for an additional plus up. We have one right now that's in the Senate's proposed transportation spending bill, $210 million that would help bolster that program for the next round of funding. But we'll be, again, going after that again. We also were able to work, with the Bus Coalition and other coalition partners, because obviously this is a group effort with our partner bus transit agencies across the country. We've been able to pursue and secure in that Senate bill report language that basically tells FTA that they should use, to the amount that they have discretion, their ability to use current fiscal year funding for prior fiscal year awards where there have been cost escalations. So say you got, let's just say $1 million to buy a bus. That was the quote you got when you put together your application. Now it's going to cost you $2 million. FTA would have that ability to provide some additional funding for you, kind of in hindsight, basically. So anyways, we'll be pursuing both of those items again, and are hopeful that even in a pretty tough fiscal climate, that we'll be able to secure some additional plus-up funding again. And then lastly, the alternative fuels tax credit extension. So this is a tax credit that Cherriots is able to take advantage of because of your use of alternative fuels. It has historically been extended in kind of 1 or 2 year increments, sometimes retroactively, which kind of defeats the purpose of a tax credit if you're not able to plan accordingly. It did receive a multi-year extension by the Inflation Reduction Act, but that expires already at the end of this year, at the end of 2024. So we will be making the case with our congressional delegation as they look at tax legislation to extend some of those items that the alternative fuels tax credit should be included in there. We've got a great ally in Senator Wyden, who is the chair of the powerful Senate Finance Committee, and obviously in a great power to influence, great position to influence things and help on your behalf. So I'll pause there real quick. I should have said, please interrupt me at any point if you have any questions or comments, but I'll pause there before I move on to my legislative preview. All right. So legislative preview. So I have legislative on here. I should probably a more apt word would be political preview, because the amount of actual legislating that's going on in DC this year is not an impressive amount. It's going to be a very political year. Again, a very fascinating one. So big picture, we talked about government funding. So they're supposed to wrap up the FY 2024 appropriations bill back at the end of September. They have not done that yet. Usually they've been able to do it by Christmas. Still haven't been able to do that. They've passed multiple continuing resolutions to just kind of kick the can down the road. So they just passed another that moves the deadline for some government agencies to March 1st, other agencies to March 8th. That's going to come up again very, very quickly, and it's going to be very tricky for them to navigate the politics around this. In addition, there's obviously the border crisis, which is top of mind, I think, to a lot of members on both sides of the aisle. And then you have Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan funding. They're trying to tie those two items together. Republicans want especially in the House, want kind of a all or nothing approach on the border from their perspective. And a lot of them are pretty skeptical about providing additional foreign aid for Ukraine. It has just made things incredibly difficult. Those are obviously two very thorny issues And so moving them at all, let alone together, has proven extremely difficult. And they've been negotiating a border bill for probably months now, at least 2 months, and still haven't even introduced one on the Senate side. So it kind of tells you how things are going. One of the big issues is that the House Republican caucus has just an extreme razor thin majority. So obviously, if you've been tracking things back here, you saw Speaker McCarthy eke his way into his role and then lose it shortly after he got it. Speaker Mike Johnson, after several other candidates went down, finally got the role. But it's obviously a coveted job, probably the hardest job in DC, because Republicans right now have about depending on the week and who's actually showing up, about a 3-seat majority. And so there's just no room to really navigate your caucus. If you move it all to the right, you start losing conservatives. If you move it all to the left, you start moving moderates, losing moderates. So it is just very difficult to advance anything in the House unless you are moving something with bipartisan support. And that's probably what's going to happen to advance appropriations funding or any of these other items. But that could very likely cost Speaker Johnson his job. There is in addition to the government spending deadline, there is also an April 1st deadline where if written into the Fiscal Responsibility Act budget agreement passed last year, there are automatic 1% cuts that will go into effect for non-defense and defense spending. It's kind of a lose-lose for everyone and was intended to be a motivator to wrap this up. And we are still hopeful that will be the case because, obviously it's great for bus transit to get these bills done. We have funding for South Salem Transit Center in there that we want to see finalized. And so at the end of the day, we're optimistic, but it's going to be a challenging, interesting ride to get that bill done. All of this, of course, is also going to be more difficult now as it's taking place in an election year. Presidential election is heating up. We've had the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primaries. So that's kind of looming over everything. Just in terms of those elections, just to kind of give you a preview of what's coming up later this fall and what we might be looking at next year. As I mentioned, razor thin majority for Republicans. The House Democrats only need to flip a couple seats in order to regain the majority. They're pretty optimistic about their chances. However, it's a very difficult map for Senate Democrats, just in terms of the 1/3 of the Senate and the seats that are up for election this year. So most people are putting their money on Senate Republicans to regain the majority and take a lot of seats that are just going to be put them in there for a while that could secure a majority for several years to come. Lastly, presidential election, certainly not going to get into predictions there. But inflation obviously is hard for any incumbent president to navigate. I think we're seeing signs that that's getting better, but ultimately that really just depends on what voters are feeling when they go to the polls later this year. One thing that could help President Biden is in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was some assistance for prescription drugs for seniors that could provide some kind of a well-timed benefit for him to secure some of the senior vote, which would be critical to winning the election again. Won't go into the rest of all the issues around the presidential election this year, but just to say it's going to loom large over everything Congress is trying to do the rest of the year. You do have some pretty interesting races there locally. I'm sure you're prepared, hopefully, to see lots and lots of campaign ads again as you're watching local television and everywhere else you turn. So Representative Salinas she's got a competitive district in CD6, but especially Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer, where Cherriots Service District extends. This is a high profile race where Democrats feel like they have a high chance of turning it over if the national election goes the right way. So that will be a fascinating one to watch, that with such a slim majority in the House will have could have a significant impact on the balance of power when we get past November later this year. So all goes to say it's going to be an interesting year back in Washington, D.C., but there's a lot of opportunity as well. There's always legislation that's moving. And the good news is that the infrastructure bill was finalized. It's funded through FY 2026. You also have the Inflation Reduction Act. So regardless of what Congress does, there's still a lot for us to pursue and leverage going forward. So ending with that ray of hope, I'll conclude things, and I'm happy to take any questions or feedback.
Do we have any questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that update.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And now we'll turn over to the State Affairs team. Here tonight is Dale Penn, State Affairs Partner, and Waylon Buchan, State Affairs Counsel.
Hello, thank you very much for having us here. We really appreciate it. We have a presentation as well that'll be up there on the screen in just a moment. And as Alan mentioned, I'm Dale, this is Waylon. We work for you in Salem, and we are very honored to represent Cherriots. I served on the Budget Committee when I was much younger, and I very much value the services you provide, and that is more evident than ever when you have the kind of storms that we saw this week and the value that Cherriots provides to make sure people are able to get to those vital necessary appointments, medical or otherwise. So thank you very much for all the work that you and the rest of the staff do in those challenging environments. I think we have it coming up soon. All right, perfect. There we go. Thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and start here. This is just the agenda of what we are hoping to talk about today. Overview of the State Affairs team, which we've already pretty much done. The 2024 legislative session, provide a little bit of an overview, timeline, dates, major issues that we're going to see, and then how they correlate with issues that impact transit. We're going to talk about the Cherriots 2024 state legislative agenda. As Alan mentioned, your legislative committee met, debated and discussed, and then developed the document that you'll see today. I think this is an attachment, and then interim conversations and elections. This is the State Affairs team, Waylon and myself. The rest of the full CFM state team are there, but mainly most of the work is through myself and Waylon. So let's talk about the 2024 legislative session. So quite a bit going on this year. We in Oregon have a short legislative session in the even-numbered years, and that means a 35-day maximum legislative session. So it starts on February 5th, and it can go until March 10th. That doesn't mean to say that it can't end early, and that's always a possibility if they're able to finalize budgets and whatnot. Originally, the short sessions were created in order to balance the budget. We have a biennial budget in Oregon, and so we pass one in the odd-numbered years, and then we don't pass another one until 2 years later. In the middle, what we found years ago was that there are often instances of budget rebalancing or recalibration, maybe some essential policies that need to be passed, and they implemented yearly sessions. And so we have a very short, quick, efficient legislative session that starts on February 5th. Committees begin on the 6th. We'll see bills starting to move 1 week after that, and then they'll start moving out of chambers. And we'll be done within 4 to 5 weeks with a final budget, updated budget. In the middle of that, we will see another economic forecast. As you have seen in the past, our economic forecasts over the last 2 or 3 years have been fairly robust. This 2023 tax year, Oregonians will receive a historically large kicker because of expected revenues coming in much higher than anyone forecasted. And so that February 7th date, that economic forecast will serve as the bedrock for legislative leadership to put together any of those budget tweaks. And there's going to be a lot on the docket, a lot of issues, a lot of priorities from the governor, from the legislative leaders, and from many lawmakers around the state in order to how should we spend that money. And I'll leave the filing day conversation till later, but then usually right after a legislative session ends, we have filing day deadlines for anyone who's interested in those statewide offices, state, local elected positions as well. They have to be filed officially by March 12th. And usually at the Capitol, when it's not under renovation, there's a big billboard with a lot of names up there, all the districts that usually are tracked pretty closely. So let's talk about some of the major issues that we'll be tackling this year. The number one priority from legislative leadership, and in particular the governor, is around housing. And I think in every community across the state, housing and homelessness and houselessness is a huge issue. And so the legislature is going to tackle this with the governor's single bill. She has the ability to introduce several. She chose just to introduce a single bill, and that will be Senate Bill 1537, Legislative Concept 19, which will be in front of the committees on housing right away. This will include quite a bit of additional investments. The governor's asking for north of $500 million. That would go towards moderate income housing financing, site acquisition, climate-friendly incentive funding, site mitigation and readiness, local housing planning, all sorts of issues. It's going to be heavily debated. I think this is going to have some broad support. It's just the real question is how much investment can the legislature make in that single item? They're going to have a limited amount of budget, and they're going to have huge priorities, not only this, but some of the other things listed up there, including some Measure 110 changes, addiction, behavioral health, and then a whole bevy of other funding requests and very limited bonding authority to do that, either lottery bond or GO bonds on capital infrastructure. So we're going to have a lot of legislative bills that have fiscals attached to them, and we're going to be tracking all of those. Another deadline that this committee should know is that on the 2nd of next week, February 2nd, we expect to see the bills dropped for the legislative session. They may drop early. We'll work with your Cherriots team as those bills drop, and we review them to see if there are any that impact Cherriots or the issues that you care about on your legislative agenda, and we'll develop strategies around that. During a long legislative session, we could see north of 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 bills because legislators have an unlimited number that they can pre-session file. During a short session, because we have such limited time, legislators are capped at 2 bills each. So it's a lot smaller of a number of bills that we have to track. So we expect somewhere between 250 and 350 bills. The committees have a few, they can do 3 each. The governor, the Senate President, and Speaker. There's a few other additional bills that are floating around there, but it's usually around 250 to 350 bills. So that weekend we'll be reviewing those, contacting Alan and working with your teams to see where and how we need to engage. And then the continued Capitol renovation challenges. Many, if not all of you, have been to the Capitol multiple times. You've been there to support Cherriots issues. You've seen the limited space that we have to work with now. It's mainly just the single hallway and some hearing rooms there, and then the wings where all the offices are located. What we expect to happen over the next 2 years, that's going to be the footprint for the short session. And then next year, as those Capitol renovations improve, we'll get more access and more space. But it's going to be a very tight, very difficult operating environment at the Capitol over the next year. Any questions on those issues right now? All right, I'll turn over to Waylon for the next one.
Let me borrow this. So in addition to what I would call the flagship issues articulated by Dale, behavioral health, mental health, addiction, housing, we are going to see discussions on some of these other topics that are brewing, particularly with an eye towards 25 and 27, and that's really the big transportation package. We do see a transportation discussion start to heat up about once a decade. We really kicked this process off in the early 2000s with the OTA Bridge Program, 01 through 03. We did the Jobs and Transportation Act in 09. We did a really big one, House Bill 2017 in 2017, which you're all aware of because it was transformative, provided transit funding on a meaningful level statewide for the first time really ever. And so we're on a cadence in this state where about every 8 to 10 years, we come back and look at an investment package for really for all modes. That's kind of why we call them packages, because we're not typically just raising the gas tax a few cents. We're kind of doing a lot. We have a few different facets of this conversation that make 2025 and 2027 particularly challenging. We have some constitutional issues that lawmakers are going to have to address. Cost responsibility, for one, is out of alignment, so heavy commercial vehicles are overpaying their fair share. Constitution requires those have to come into balance. So we're going to have to see something, either a lowering of heavy taxes, which we won't see likely, or an increase on the light side through some sort of revenue mechanism. That's all complicated by ODOT's looming budget crisis. They do continue to get diminishing returns on the gas tax, so that's no longer a great revenue instrument going out into the decades. So they're really wrestling with that as well, and what's going to replace the fuels tax, whether that's a road user charge or higher registration fees or some other mechanism. They're going to have a reconciliation to all of those different challenges. And so that's all coming to a head, but we are also seeing a recognition that we're probably not going to see a gigantic $5.3 billion package like we saw in 2017. We are seeing a lower appetite to raise revenues really high, and we're seeing a focus on back to the basics, safety, maintenance, and preserving the system that we have while trying to address some of these really prickly challenges. At the same time, it's down farther in the list, we're going to have to implement tolling at some point. Oregon's in the kind of vendor selection phase. They're writing their business rules. They're going to set rates. They're going to approve that through the Oregon Transportation Commission. And the governor, who has a moratorium on tolling until January 1st of 2026, they're still doing that work. They're still undertaking that work. There's going to be some legislative input in that work. And so as we see all of those transportation discussions mature, they are going to undertake another roadshow or statewide tour as a joint committee. They're going to try to do that work in 2024 so that they can come prepared with some statewide input for that transportation package in potentially 2025, or if it fails, in 2027. In addition to that, we're also seeing the necessary budget adjustments, both ODOT for supplemental winter funding, Medicaid rebalances. We have major state agency rebalances that they're requesting, and of course, as Dale mentioned, the governor has a pretty substantial interest in taking $500 to $600 million in general funds for her initiatives as well. So those are some of the other kind of hot topics we see coming at us, and they will take up quite a bit of bandwidth in 2024, even if they're not really ready for prime time until 25. Any questions on that piece?
All right, let's go into
Looks
our.
like we have a question from Director Carney.
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get to my reactions fast enough. You may have said this, and maybe I missed it. Is ODOT limited to fuel tax for funding, or would they need like expanded statutory authority in order to get money from a different source? I just was listening to the Oregon Transportation Plan, a presentation on that earlier today, and I know that part of their goals are to reduce VMT by 20%, which that to me says probably lower fuel tax availability, and to reduce greenhouse gas or CO2 emissions by 77% in the next 20 years. And that to me also says a lot cleaner fuels. So there must be a path. I just don't know if there's a good or a clear one. And if you had any insight, that'd be helpful.
That's a great question, Director. And I think part of the biggest problem that they're dealing with the fuels tax is just the diminishing returns that they get for every cent of tax they put on the fuel. And as vehicles are just more and more fuel efficient, that's going to just kind of be a diminishing revenue source in general. They have authority now to enact gas taxes. They have the weight mile tax, which they can adjust for commercial vehicles. We have an active Orgo pilot that technically is on the books today that they can put people in, and that's an active revenue collecting instrument. They have reg fees. They have quite a few different tools in their toolkit. I think the biggest challenge is getting the public appetite there for something transformative like a road user charging. That's a big paradigm shift. We'd be the first state to do something like that and just jettison something like the gas tax. Gas tax is super cheap to administer. It's like one of the cheapest revenue instruments we have. So there's some challenges. And then the arithmetic's got to be just right. When you switch over for something that funds the entire highway system or the lion's share of it and go to something like a road user charge, you better hope that everyone's got their decimal points in just the right place and we don't jeopardize the whole state's highway fund. So big challenge and a little bit adjacent to some of the climate impacts that you're talking about. But that's their big challenge right now is just what do you do with a revenue instrument that's got you painted into a corner like the gas tax does today.
Right, and that's just one corner they're painted into, because if they're trying to reduce CO2 emissions and VMT at the same time, they're running out of corners to paint themselves into. Okay, thank you.
Definitely.
Thanks. All right, thank you so much. The next slide is our actual 2024 state legislative agenda. This is the document that, as Alan mentioned, your legislative committee has adopted. We usually will organize priorities 1, 2, and 3. Priority 1, highest level. These are issues that are or warrant either board active or lobbying, Alan, myself, Waylon, active connection and conversations. You'll see number 1 is a perennial issue after the 2017 package with the implementation of the statewide transit employee payroll tax. This is one we want to preserve, maintain, and eventually enhance that to provide the services, the vital services you and other transit districts around the state. Sorry about that. And so that's something that we consistently fight for regularly. Once the 2017 package passed, and I've told this story before, the very next session we had efforts to sweep some of those funds for an ancillary use. And so we've had to fight to preserve that from the get-go. That's our highest priority. When Alan and Waylon and I meet with legislators, we almost always bring this issue up just to make sure that they're aware that this is our highest priority, and I know the other transit districts around the state do the same. Transit safety, this is an issue that not only Cherriots, but other Oregon Transit Association members, transit entities around the state are pushing forward this year. This is tied a little bit into the Measure 110 issue. There is an effort to ensure that drug use on transit property potentially has an elevated legal classification to maybe a Class A misdemeanor, anything that interferes with public transportation. We're having conversations with legislative leadership. The Measure 110 committee brought forward recommendations that did not include this component, but we are going to be looking and monitoring for any opportunity to educate legislators on safety on transit, whether that's for the rider, for the staff, for everyone involved. It's a significant issue and one that we are having conversations with right now with lawmakers. Another priority 1 issue is the Senate Bill 1572, and when we drafted this, I didn't have a bill number yet, but this is an ODOT study connecting Portland, the Portland metro area, West Side Express service commuter train from the terminal in Wilsonville for 31 miles down here into Salem. So this is one we are supportive of, and Senator Aaron Woods from the Canby area, as well as Representative Kevin Mannix from Service District here in Salem, Kaiser, and several other legislators are pushing forward, and so we're monitoring and actively engaged in that. And then we get to the level 2 priorities. So we always track zero emission vehicle and infrastructure investments. We ensure that we support increased investments in bike ped opportunities. We're monitoring property tax reform. This is kind of a political third rail issue that often gets brought up and then goes nowhere. And so this is one we want to monitor because of the importance for property tax revenue for Cherriots and other district needs. So, and then priority 3, these are issues we monitor from a distance. They don't directly impact you necessarily, but they impact the transportation system. And in general, when we're talking about the first item there, I-5 bridge, that impacts the whole region. So we will monitor those and see if there are opportunities for us to engage, but for the most part, we will just report back on what's going on with those issues. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions regarding the state legislative agenda, or if there's anything else Alan wanted to add.
Any questions? Director Lara Midkiff?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dale, for being here. Mr. Penn, excuse me.
Thank you.
So when I was reading this in advance of this meeting for the transit safety component, it didn't mention anything that you just mentioned, or at least what I heard you say, which was around, and I'm not on the subcommittee or legislative subcommittee, so I wasn't in those conversations, but Could you unpack more for me what you
Sure.
just started talking about, which was around drug use on transportation property and things like that?
Sure. So the Oregon Transit Association and some of the members have been urging lawmakers to in some way protect transit riders and drivers, working with the ATU, which is the transit lobby, to bring forward something to increase or incentivize individuals to not utilize drug use on buses or bus facilities. So right now, when you have an IPT charge or interfering with the public transportation charge, it is a Class C misdemeanor. And so there are transit advocates who are looking at if there's an appetite or an interest to increase that from a Class C misdemeanor to a Class A. And the Measure 110 committee released recommendations this last week, and that did not include that. So we are at this point monitoring conversations and seeing what other discussions around transit safety as it relates to the Measure 110 committee are going on. This is not right now part of the Measure 110 recommendations.
Thank you for that. And I don't want to relitigate here, but it's not the hill I'm going to die on exactly, but what evidence do you have that reclassing this offense would actually serve as a deterrent?
I don't have any off the top of my head or anything that I can present to the board right now around that. I can try to get some of that information and bring it back.
I would appreciate that. I am weary of this board's positionality in advocating for those sorts of things generally. And I think that would warrant a much deeper conversation on that point, or at least I would like to have that conversation. I'm not particularly in the business, or I try not to be in the business of criminalizing people more than they already are.
Completely understand.
So that would be, I don't know what that would look like. Maybe Alan, if you want to jump in here.
If I could make some comments and you can help clean it up. So this whole issue is an initiative led by TriMet, because in working with their district attorney at the current levels, when there's issues on TriMet buses, the DA doesn't move forward because they don't want to do anything. So they're looking for a way to tighten it up so that the true people that are using drugs on the bus, who are impacting other riders, who, as opposed to if you're out on the street, you can just walk away.
Yeah.
You're kind of stuck on the bus with this, and it becomes an uncomfortable, untenable situation, and it puts the drivers in an awkward position. So that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and I appreciate that elaboration, and I agree that is a problem. I'm not sure if that's the solution, or the solution that we would want to advocate as a board in our legislative priorities. That's I guess where I'm raising some questions and some concern. But I don't know, people who are on, I don't know. Maybe this isn't the thing we talk about, but it's important.
Yeah. I have some similar reservations. I'm fully in support of us focusing on transit safety. I'm less confident in that this is the particular solution to that particular problem. Under the framework that was released by the co-chairs for the Measure 110 committee, they are proposing to allocate what is likely to be a significant amount of money towards different kinds of deflection services. And they have presently identified counties, tribes, and then organizations as entities that could receive these resources. I would be particularly interested to ensure that transit agencies are able to receive those resources. So in my conception, we could have additional security officers, unarmed security officers on our buses, at our transit centers, to get them the resources that they need. Do not disturb our transit riders, ensure the safety of our transit operators. And so I think that is a relatively minor fix. It's just it's a definition change. And because even if the increase of the severity were to deter it, I have serious concerns about the realistic possibility that the prosecutor's offices will have the capacity to even, work with these cases. Right now, it's actually the prosecutor's offices are generally staffed enough. It's the public defenders that we don't have enough. And so I'm afraid it's not the solution to our particular problem right now. Perhaps the facts on the ground could change, but I'm fully in support of the language that is presently on the legislative agenda. I just, to echo maybe some more comments from my colleague, I would be supportive of different solutions to that particular problem.
Well, thank you very much, directors, and that's great feedback and guidance for us as we do our work here. So thank you.
Thank you.
And
And we've got one, I'll go to Director Carney and then Director Navarro.
thank you, President Hinojosa. I just want to let my fellow board members who don't serve on the legislative subcommittee know that this was an area of robust conversation in our legislative subcommittee meeting. And, to the points that Director Davidson made earlier, we're watching it very closely in terms of the shape a solution might take. I think we can all support transit safety for our operators, for our riders, for our community. But it needs to take the right shape, I think, especially for this board. I don't want to solve TriMet's problems and create problems for our own community.
Director Navarro?
And I just want to echo what everybody's saying up here, which is, we all support public safety. We support transit safety. We support the safety of the individuals who are in recovery, who are struggling with mental health issues and addiction issues, to get the support that they need. For those that aren't too familiar with my story, it was public access to public transportation that got me to, my meetings when I was struggling coming home from combat. And so I'd really be against anything that deters people from utilizing public transportation to get to those services, those vital services that they need. So it was a big conversation that we were having during this committee because I feel like there needs to be a solution. We haven't quite figured out what that is yet. When Measure 110 was implemented, one of the barriers to agencies like Cherriots to be able to apply for funding for transit safety was that we had to be a part of what's it called? I want to say it's called the RHEX, the Regional Health.
Burns?
The Burns, that's what it was. And if you're not initially part of that burn, then you don't have access to those funds. And so it was a policy issue. And there was also the addition of when they were citing folks, they weren't giving them access to resources. It was just people were getting cited and let go. There was no 1-800 number to call to be able to gain access to these resources. So I think that we do need to have a more robust conversation about what it would look like for us to support this type of initiative that TriMet's leading. But we all want to make sure that folks give the help that they need.
And could we just get some clarity on what BURNS stands for?
Behavioral Health Resource Network.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Director Holmstrom.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to change gears a little bit. I support everything that the rest of the board has had to say, of course, on that topic. But I'm going to talk a little bit about transportation system financing and revenues a little bit. And you guys touched on this a lot, so maybe I'm just rehashing everything. But the first thing I noticed when I read this this list, which I think is good, and I appreciate the committee's work to put this together, is that on the bottom there it says tolling, and it's not just tolling we're talking about. We're talking about pricing, right? System pricing, whether that's tolling, whether that's road user charge, whether that's range of other mechanisms. Like you said, the transportation system financing system that we have now is not tenable into the future. It's not sustainable. It's not going to cut it. And I know this isn't going to get tackled in 24. It's going to get tackled in 25. Hopefully, maybe later on, we'll see. But I think it's important that we continue to keep an eye on that. Obviously, not just because of we want to maintain and enhance financing for transit operations, for sure. But I think the bigger picture to make sure that the mechanisms that are going into place are supporting our goals for not only sustainable revenue for the entire transportation system, but meeting our climate goals and our other, what was the other? Obviously safety, but system management. there's a lot of things that we can, system management is, just building more lanes doesn't work. We all know that. That's just how it, we've tried that over and over and over and over again. It doesn't work. And the pricing is what does it, and that's helped with the congestion management. So I think continuing to assess that there's a connection to transit there as well. I just want to make sure that we're continuing to keep an eye on that. I think you guys are. I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that publicly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think it's also worth noting that in addition to just revenue collection and someday maybe even road user charging, which you could just view as mobile tolling, tolling is really, it's never been successful in the United States unless it's been implemented in tandem with robust transit options, public transit service. And you never really see a jurisdiction succeed just doing tolling on its own two legs. They always have to beef up the public transit options at the same time. So I think it's sort of one way or the other, it's part of the conversation as you put together that package, and it's always going to kind of rub up against public transit as we're fighting for our own revenue stream. That's one we really can't take our eye off of, so I 100% agree with you. Thank you. Well said. Any other questions on the 2024 agenda?
Director Davidson?
Speaking of the tolling piece, and are the constitutional limits that are placed on the Highway Transit Fund, would that apply to any tolling revenue?
If I understand the question correctly, so the state constitution is still going to apply to all tolling revenue collected. So Article 9, Section 3A says if it's use, operation, of ownership of a motor vehicle, or basically taxing the propulsion of that vehicle, it's going to go to the highway fund.
Got it.
So all of that tolling revenue is basically going to be captured by the constitutional provision there.
In which case, the importance of finding separate and independent revenue for mass transit districts in companion, okay.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
Director Holmstrom?
Yeah, thank you. And I don't want to necessarily do all back and forth here. Absolutely, the constitutional provisions are a challenge, and we need to find other sources for doing for additional transit operations, absolutely. There are a lot of things that can be done within the highway or the street right-of-ways that support transit service that can be used with that money, and I think sometimes we paint ourselves into a corner that we don't need to paint ourselves into, or our partners do that, and we just need to make sure that, pedestrian, cycling, transit are all supported in that right-of-way using all the resources that are available to us. Thank you.
Well said.
Well, thank you. I thank you for your presentation. I know that it's your job to advocate for us at this transit level, but the fact that you were just like, here's that constitutional law was just really surprising to me. And so again, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
We're not quite done yet.
Yeah, I think that brings us into.
Oh, you still have no?
Yeah, we have this one. We can go ahead and be very quick about this, or skip it over, actually, so.
Yeah, this just talks about upcoming deadlines that we've already sort of touched on. We'll see a lot of legislative turnover. Yeah.
And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the third piece of this is the board priorities and principles. So page 33 of your packet shows the board priorities and principles that were adopted by the board in 2021. The purpose of tonight is twofold. One, to create this as part of the annual legislative update and to reaffirm that the existing priorities are still valid. So the legislative subcommittee reviewed these. There's five areas of priorities and principles, and these are designed to be used when representatives of the board are meeting either SCATs or MWACT or with other local governments, that you can talk with confidence that the board has already supported these topic areas, which includes support for increased public transit funding, pedestrian bicyclist infrastructure, environmental justice, maintenance of existing travel lanes before building new infrastructure, and unaccounted for costs. And each of the principles has a definition listed in that. So the recommendation before you tonight from the legislative subcommittee is to adopt the 2024 legislative agenda and board priority and principles as shown in attachments A through C.
Do we have any questions on those priorities and principles? No? Okay, well, The only thing I want to say is I just appreciate the red-lined item. I know there was like minor changes, but I'd really like to see that, so thank you. Okay, so would anyone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the board adopt the 2024 legislative agenda and board priorities and principles as shown in attachments A, B, and C.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the item? Nope, okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That will move us right into our agenda item 7B, award of contract for purchase of paratransit buses. General Manager Pollock.
Yes, I'd ask Maintenance Manager Greg Thompson to please come forward and present the staff report.
I feel like it's been quite some time since we've seen you here.
It's been a while, and I'll be up here for a while, it looks like. So, President Enos Pressey and members of the board, good evening. Tonight, I am asking that the board authorize the general manager to enter a contract with Northwest Bus Sales for the purchase of 7 compressed natural gas buses for the use in the Cherriots Lift ADA service for an amount not to exceed $1,297,084. I'm very excited to present this to you again tonight, and we'll get into kind of what happened in the previous one. Approval tonight is actually a major milestone for the contracted services and a step towards having alternative fuel vehicles in that service. This direction has been strongly investigated, trying to overcome alternative fuel vehicle challenges for use in the contracted fleet has presented its own challenges. Some of them with infrastructure, some of them with the methodology in which they fuel, and then vehicle availability for right size for use in that fleet. This will, I lost my place. There have been delays in vehicle availability, volatile pricing, affecting the ability to enter into a contract, as well as resolving how to actually use the vehicles in that service. We were able to partner with our current contracted services provider, MTM, and the district has found a path on how to begin using the CNG vehicles for that Cherriots Lift service. Fueling will take place at the Del Webb Maintenance Facility as they have time to fuel. And we will also be using, and that will help our fleet use the RNG revenue as well. At the January 22nd board meeting, approval was given for these very same buses. Unfortunately, due to the economic conditions of the time from COVID-19, alternative fuel vehicle chassis were not available. They were on large back orders and delays. There were also numerous price increases which caused the district to cancel the order. Essentially what happened is we had a contract, force majeure, they were unable to hold those pricing. They had no end in sight. We couldn't enter into a contract, let alone a competitive procurement, so we ended up just canceling everything, waiting for hopefully things to calm down a little bit and be a little more stable. In September of '23, the solicitation was refreshed. 3 bids were received, and a source evaluation committee reviewed the bids and found that Northwest Bus Sales to meet all specifications and was the lowest cost vendor. This project is included as part of the capital projects section of the district's adopted fiscal year '24 budget, and funding for the proposed contract is covered through federal 5310 and STIF formula grants, each with different match amounts, which are listed in your table 1 in your packet. For the 5310 funds, the grant percentage is 89.73%. The match amount is 10.7%, making the grant portion $717,842. The match amount $82,160 for a total of $800,002. STIF formula is a 100% grant, so there is no match amount. We're using $497,082 to add to the 5310 for a total of $497,082, and the total is $1,297,084. Staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Northwest Bus Sales for the purchase of 7 CNG paratransit vehicles for use in the Cherriots Lift ADA service for an amount not to exceed the $1,297,084. And I can answer any questions.
All right, any questions? Director Holmstrom?
Yeah, thank you very much. These are cutaway buses like our existing paratransit vehicles?
They are, they'll match their, they'll be high floor, so they won't be the low floor because of the CNG option, but they will be the cutaway style vehicles.
Okay, and so these are the first natural gas fueled paratransit vehicles that the district has had?
Correct.
Okay, and everything else is either, is it a diesel or gasoline?
For that service, on the ADA service, it's all gasoline.
Okay, thank you.
Director Carney?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Pressy. Is the significant challenge that is noted, or significant obstacle, is because we are keeping these vehicles at a separate location? And they would have to kind of come way out of their way, and they have their fuel up spot over there, but if they're operating on a different fuel, they'd have to come through where our other CNG buses are fueling up?
That's a large portion of it because it is contracted and it's off-site. Building fueling infrastructure, for example, on somebody else's property with our funds makes it really difficult. The MTM doesn't own, they lease the property, so it'd be a lease improvement, so that has issues. If we were doing electric charge plug-in vehicles, that would be an issue. So it's really the infrastructure issue was one of the big obstacles to overcome. We looked at things like auto gas, which is propane, and then you run into capacity on where you can fuel those, because that's a whole nother thing. The way that the service works now is they essentially, if they're half a tank or below and they have a chance, they fuel. So we have to kind of change the way that they do the service as well. And they have to come through our Del-Webb facility, and then we have to, our staff will register the fuel used so we can charge that fuel to that grant, but still track it all under our fleet. So various issues there.
How much additional capacity in terms of land area would we need to keep all of our paratransit vehicles in the same place as our fixed route fleet?
I think that's a bigger question than I can answer.
I can answer that.
I think that, Alan.
So in this upcoming fiscal year, there's funds, and actually in this year, to do a facilities assessment for either expansion or consider a new location due to one of the desires is to consolidate all of our vehicles on one facility.
Mm-hmm. And the call center for our paratransit service, that's still co-located with Del-Webb?
No, that is with MTM.
Okay. And so the idea would we would bring all of that into a single location in an ideal future?
That's correct.
Great, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Director Davidson?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Pressy. Could you talk to me about what a high floor paratransit vehicle, how it works, especially given the population that it serves, and can it kneel? How does getting people into the paratransit vehicle work when it's a high floor?
Director Davidson, good question. So there's a difference between some of our fleet is low floor, which kneels, which mirrors the local service as far as height and angle. The high floor paratransit buses have steps for people that are able to use the steps, and then also there is still an ADA mobility device that's just instead of a ramp, so it has a lift. So it still serves the same demographics. They're pretty interchangeable, but if there was a CNG option that was low floor, that'd be preferable. But since there's CNG tanks, they have to keep it to kind of what you think of the old-fashioned cutaway vehicles, what they look like. And we still currently have kind of a mixture in our fleet now.
Great. Thank you.
All righty. Any other questions? No? Director Larmankiv? No?
Thank you. I have a very brief question, which is rare for me. First of all, good to meet you. We haven't met before, and I wasn't here in January, so thank you for your commitment through all the economic turmoil to get this project, see it through. But Director Davidson's question inspired mine. I'm a wheelchair user, and I have used high floor buses, and I was bused to school when I went to public school. For those who aren't in chairs, but maybe can't, because the steps are very high. For those who don't know, they're really quite a challenge to get through, even for people who are able-bodied. I just don't know. What is the intermediary like for someone who can't make the steps, would want the service, but isn't a wheelchair user? How would they?
They can still request the use of the lift.
But walk me through that. So there'd be like a chair that you would sit in, or they would just stand on it?
You stand on the platform.
Okay,
There's safety securements,
Sure.
so you don't fall out of it when it's raised. There's handrails, so you can stand, hold, and just lift.
Thank you, Manager Thompson. Having never been in that position, I didn't know, so thank you.
Okay, Director Navarro?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Presley. So the question I have is, how do these compare, the interior compare to the existing vehicles that we have right now? And the reason I ask that is because I remember there was an issue that a veteran had brought to my attention where when he was trying to turn around inside one of the buses, he kept getting caught up. And the ultimate solution, I think, was removing some of the baskets that he had on there. But I just wonder, are they similar in size, or are they smaller?
They'll be almost the interior floor plan layout will be exactly the same. All of the buses that we purchase do meet ADA requirements as far as the access points, the pivot points. Where some of the struggle comes is when you have oversized mobility devices that would just don't fit in those areas. But these will have a very similar floor plan to the rest of the fleet.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Manager Thompson. Do we have a motion on this item?
I move the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Northwest Bus Sales for the purchase of 7 CNG paratransit buses for use in the Cherriots lift ADA service for an amount not to exceed $1,297,084.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on this? Director Davidson?
I just want to say that I'm thrilled that we're transitioning to compressed and ultimately renewable natural gas for these paratransit buses. I also want to put on the record that there will be some financial benefits to us using alternative fuels like this, and I would love to see that money for these paratransit vehicles go to partially fund a micro-mobility study. So just wanted to stick that out there.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I mean, I saw the attempt at the going off mute, Director Carney, so.
I'm an aye. I'm an aye.
I'll take that as a motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Manager Thompson. We'll move on to our next item. General Manager Pollock.
Maintenance Manager Thompson.
Hey, here I am. Good evening, President Hinojosa Presley, members of the board, good evening. It was interesting that we just saw a presentation from CFM advocates about how they helped obtain some grants. I'm here to spend that. Tonight I'm asking the board to authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 10 40-foot battery electric buses to replace 10 40-foot diesel buses for an amount not to exceed $12,757,050. In 2023, the district was awarded 2 grants. Each grant allows for the purchase of 5 battery electric buses, charging, infrastructure, engineering, and construction. Tonight, we're working on just the bus portion. The first grant is a 2023 Lono grant, which is the third time that the district has been successful in being awarded this competitive grant. The second grant is a community project funding grant, the CPF. This grant was made possible by the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022 and is selected through a congressionally directed application process. Again, in total, this order will be for another 10 battery electric buses. Once notified of the successful grant awards, I worked with Gillig to obtain some price quotes earlier in last year. This locking in the bus costs while we were working through the procurement process. The good news is that from that time until now, using the Washington State price agreement, there was a 10 to 12% price increase. Locking in the price early shielded us from that, which is a savings or a cost offset of about $1.5 million. So I was glad that we didn't have to pay that. And we also, because of our relationship that we've built with Gillig at the time of that award, and we're looking at the bus pricing, we're able to actually tentatively hold our production queues. And so there'll come a time where they say we need a PO or you get back to the back of the line, but we're able to kind of progress through that. So at that time, essentially the clock started ticking. Bus builds take about 15 to 18 months to build. We're expecting these 10 buses to be delivered December of 24, so December of this year. So maybe January. We'll see what the production schedule actually does, but they usually keep it pretty close. All 10 battery electric buses will be procured using the Washington State price agreement and under the procedures set by the Washington Department of Transportation's Public Transit Division. The tables below are actually going to outline, since it's two funding grants using several grants, and it's 2 orders of 5, so we'll break out each of those orders and then we'll roll them back up together on the third table. So table 1, for the Low-No grant, which is an 85-15 match. So the grant amount is $5,182,343, with the match amount being $914,532, with a total of $6,096,880. We are adding Oregon DAS funds, which is a 100% grant amount of $281,645. And that brings the total for that at $6,378,525. For the CPF grant, it's an 84.9% grant amount and a 15.1% match. The grant money that we'll be using is $5,415,368. The match amount is $963,157, totaling $6,378,525. Table 3 takes those 3 grants and rolls them up together to show the total of $12,757,050. Staff recommends the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 10 40-foot battery electric buses for an amount not to exceed the $12,757,050. And I can answer any questions you have, hopefully.
Okay. Any questions? All right. So would anyone like to make a motion?
Are you looking at me? Sorry. Okay, cool. I'd love to make a motion. I move that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Gillig for the purchase of 10 40-foot battery electric buses for an amount not to exceed $12,757,050.
Second.
Awesome. We have a motion and a second. And is there any discussion on this motion? Yes, Director Davidson?
Thank you, President. I wasn't sure if I wanted to phrase this as a question, but I'll just make it as a comment. You really undersold yourself here. You saved the district $1.5 million, and you got the buses here not only on time, but possibly ahead of schedule with the relationship that you have. Just thank you. Like, you and whoever else was involved in this, that is really, really impressive. You saved this. I mean, this could have been a 9-bus order functionally, and it could have been at least another year. When we got these funds, I was expecting 2025 at the earliest. And this is just fantastic. So thank you. And yeah, and to any of the federal delegation, we're spending the funds. Please keep giving us more money. We will buy more buses and we will buy them quickly. So, yeah.
All righty. Yes, Director Holmstrom?
Yes, President Hinojosa, may I ask a question?
Sure. Let's
Yeah,
go for it.
thank you. So, just curious, did we use the same procurement, the same price agreement for the buses we have on property now? I'm just curious.
We actually did. In both the Lono grants, we're able to actually, in the grant award, name partners. And in those circumstances, constitutes the procurement.
Right.
However, when we reach out to Gillig, they based their pricing off of the Washington State price agreement because they've already negotiated the lowest cost for that they use statewide for both Oregon and Washington.
Great. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. So just so that everyone's on the same page, we have 10 buses we purchased before. They're on the property now, correct? And then
Right.
this would be the next 10, so this would be a total of 20 altogether.
That is correct.
Correct. We're going to use, at some point when we have all of the infrastructure put together later this year, hopefully, we'll have buses running on Route 11, correct?
That is correct.
Correct. And
You're
then,
stealing my show for the next part.
I'm sorry?
You're stealing my show for the
Oh,
next
well,
part.
you know what?
You're fine. I'm sorry.
You know what? I'll ask these my next question is the next time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great work.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. And then I guess we'll just tee it right up. General Manager Pollock?
Maintenance Manager Thompson.
Are we able to load the slideshow? All right. Well, good evening, President Hinojosa and members of the board. Good to see you. Tonight, I will be giving a presentation on where we're currently at with our battery electric bus project. I want to first start off with thanking Chief Operating Officer Tom Dietz for doing the last presentation in my absence. And there will be several updates, and some of them are as fresh as of today, because things are moving pretty quickly. So just a quick recap. The work occurring today is the spending of the 2020 and 2021 Lono grants. There are additional grants that will provide even more buses and more chargers, most recently the ones you just approved 5 minutes ago. I say that this is it's a large project. It includes numerous steps. I think every single department in the organization is involved. Finance, procurement, security, maintenance. I mean, everybody's involved. It really takes a village to make this happen. This is included, for this first step, it's included 19 different contracts and multiple board approvals throughout the course of the last couple of years. And it also has been a fantastic partnership with the vendors that are listed on the page there. Gillig, obviously, is the manufacturer of the buses. They've been a fantastic partner for both building the specifications, the training. We just had our 4th round of training conclude today for the maintenance staff. They've been very good helping us with that. Cummins does the propulsion and the batteries. They've been they're a great partnership with us and Gillig in the communication for those. CTE is the Center for Transit and the Environment, and they're in consulting through the areas that were, especially the ones that were unknown to the district at the time, such as charger selection, charge management, route validation, and project organization. PGE has been a massive help, especially in coordination with their fleet partner program at Kaiser Transit Center. Because of them, they handled most all of the engineering, most all of the construction, offset some of our costs, which actually allowed us to purchase the third inductive charger in one of those bays. So it was really a help, and they've done fantastic work out there. Induct EV, which is formerly Momentum Dynamics, they doing the inductive chargers at Kaiser. They have been great partners, and we'll go through here in just a little bit on what the status update and where they are at in their process. And then wrapping up at Kaiser with J.H. Kelly. J.H. Kelly, we enlisted to come out, and they did the cabinet placement. They did the pulling of the conduit into the charging stations in the ground, into the cabinets. They did the high voltage connections, the low voltage connections, and the fiber optic cabling. Mont McDonald has been played a key role at our Del Webb location with the project engineering, electrical engineering, plan sets, designs, and bid documents. So they really had offered that technical expertise. ChargePoint is the vendor that we chose to do the depot charging. So there's dispensers, charge blocks. They've been fantastic working with our vendors to make sure everything's installed and constructed correctly. And then I kind of saved EC Electric for last. They have been out there in the rain, in the snow, doing all of the construction at Del Webb. They have done some amazing things. They have worked with us, and they have really saved, with their expertise and their foresight, have really helped us work through some issues. They've been patient with us while issues have arisen, and through their foresight have actually helped us navigate around what would have been other issues. So they've been just a great partner for us. We have, for this project, we have bi-weekly meetings that the vendors are all on, and we're doing status updates. And what's neat is, for example, at Kaiser, PGE, Induct EV, everybody had each other's contacts. So there was conversations and discussions and progress happening outside of the meetings. So they weren't reliant on me to facilitate the communication. They were coming up with resolution. So when we would meet, they would say, oh yeah, we talked about this, and this is how we're gonna proceed. Same thing happened at Del Webb. Salem Electric, I don't know, hopefully I didn't miss them. So they're gonna be doing the transformation and doing the final connections here. So it's really been a great partnership, and I think everyone's aligned with what the end goal is for this project. So where are we at so far? There's been a lot of things happening. At KTC, the construction is complete. The transformers and switchgear have power, they're energized. The Induct EV cabinets are installed and wired. Unfortunately, the downside was during the installation of those, it was found that the coolant hoses and the special connectors for those didn't show up with all the multi-crates for the order, and they were a custom order from Switzerland. They are actually supposed to be here tomorrow, which is fantastic. Induct EV will be back out on January 30th. They'll finish installing the charge pads, and the charge pads in this picture, they're blue and orange. Those are just construction cover plates, essentially. The coils that will set on top of that are still out at Del Webb. So next week, they'll finish their connections and set the actual charge pads into each of those square holes where the electrical cables are. The The buses themselves are, in order to communicate with the chargers, need a software update. We were waiting a little bit while that software was actually being built. It's now done, complete, tested, and Cummins is in charge of doing that update. They're supposed to be out on site next week to do that software update. February 5th, I think, hopefully, this is knock on wood if everything goes as planned, if everyone does the things that they're supposed to do and all the parts show up. February 5th, we'll be doing a walkthrough with PGE and the vendors for the kind of the final inspection of Kaiser Transit Center. It should be live at that time. It should be ready to go, and I'm planning on that day to start rolling buses through Kaiser to have each bus connect with each charger just to make sure that it statically operates before we start our route validation. So a couple weeks, we're going to be looking very promising there. We'll move to Del Webb and where we're at. So Del Webb has seen a lot of changes, and there's a ton of pictures. Tom has done a great job with being the photographic historian of the daily updates on what's happening there. Right now, EC Electric today, they just finished their work. So at Del Webb, we have all 12 dispensers standing. All of the power blocks, which one power block controls 2 dispensers. All of the power blocks are in, they're wired to each other. We have, so the 10 buses will have 12 dispensers, we'll have a couple spares, and we've also installed infrastructure for another 8. So in the future grants, with the 20 bus order, we'll have 20 dispensers and some future expansion. Right now, what we're waiting for is kind of a land use approval that we moved a little bit of construction to allow Salem Electric to do some line boring from our current transformer over to the wash bay to then power and power the transformer. We're hoping that process moves. It's going through the FTA and the State Historic Preservation Office. So just getting some approvals for doing that work. Salem Electric's ready to go. The transformer will be delivered tomorrow. And other than that, that's our last step there. I don't have a real good date on when that will be completed because there is kind of a process that has to go through depending on responses that we receive. I'm going to try, I know the last presentation, I think some of these pictures you'd already seen. Just the trenching going down the sidewalk, all the sidewalk. One of the issues we ran into was that middle picture at the top with the stormwater. The pour of that, it was poured into place, which was much bigger than what we thought, so we had to relocate the stormwater system to allow for all the conduit to go through. You can see in that bottom center picture, runs and runs and runs of electrical conduit. And just more is the vaults, conduit. The bottom left picture is the pads on where the switchgear go. And then it just kind of keeps plugging along. Stop me if you see anything you have questions on. That's in the bottom picture in the center is what one dispenser looks like. So it's one dispenser per bus. Each bus you can plug it in on either the back left or the back right corner. And some more standing. Fresh concrete poured. And with that, I am available to answer anything I know the answers to.
Okay. I every time that you come up, I always look at Director Navarro first to see if they have any questions.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. This is awesome. This is a lot of really awesome work. I'm really excited at the progress and how cohesive everybody has been working together. So this is really exciting, and I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that you've put into this.
Thank you. It takes, like I said, it takes the support of everybody to make this happen, from when we're first having the direction to the grant applications to the, to where we're at now. It really takes everybody, and it's exciting.
Okay. Director Davidson?
Just a comment that I love the look of the buses. I love the signage. The meadow green really pops. And I also am interested in, if my assumption is correct, that we also get some revenues from using this as a less polluting kind of vehicle. I would, again, reiterate that I would love to see us be able to use that revenues to fund a feasibility study for micromobility in the next year. So, thank you.
Director Carney?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Pressy. So I have reason for asking this question, but it might seem maybe a little off the wall.
As long as it's not about the color of the sign.
It's not about the color of the sign, but I have found that often when you have a hybrid vehicle or an electric vehicle, there really is a desire to provide the operator with a lot of information about how efficiently it's operating and how far it's going and all that. Do these buses give us that kind of dashboard of information, like miles since your last charge, or like feet since your last stop, things like that?
Actually, it does. Each of the buses come with a program called Veracity that will track kind of the kilowatt hours and what they're doing. We actually had a call about it today. So we've got 3 different web-based programs. There'll be one for the inductive charging, the induct EV charging. There'll be one for the charge point charging, one for the Veracity charging, and we're working on kind of building a dashboard. We're also looking at how we can pull data from our scheduling software to not only see what the bus is doing, but see who's doing it. And we had a demonstration from TriMet a while ago where they were taking their blocks. They were able to just automatically have it populate with the operator of that route and then see what their efficiencies were. And so you could capture the people that are really successful and see what are they doing, and maybe have them as a training tool, maybe working with the people that are struggling to be in the green zone. And then there's lots of dashboard things that we're trying to compile. The carbon emissions reductions, what that means based on our utility rates. So there's a lot of pieces that we're trying to make it for both internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, and I think there's a lot of things that we should be publicly putting out in the forefront. What's happening with the district and what our zero emission goals mean.
Right on. Well, one thing that came up earlier this week in our SCATS meeting was like a South Salem transit signal improvement project. And in our conversation with the folks at the meeting, we talked about how the improvements in South Salem would give us the ability to potentially expand the pilot project that's happening on Lancaster for transit signal priority. And I was thinking, wow, if we could look and see and have that visible metric of how much more efficient our buses can be, maybe it's in terms of how much more timely they are along the route, or where they save time, or the fewer starts and stops that create the efficiency, and kind of visualize that and use that as a way to demonstrate the success and the need for expansion of the pilot or expansion of the project citywide. So I just thought, maybe there's going to be some kind of sparkly dashboard on this bus, or a bunch of information that would lend itself to that cause. So,
well,
thank you.
Director Carter, there's a couple pieces of that, and what's really exciting is we don't know what we don't know. We don't right now, but we're getting close to being able to prove what the buses can do, and that's really going to be not only for Route 11, but we're going to be able to do validation testing. We're going to see, when the bus pulls into Kaiser and it sits for 10 minutes, how much power does it get back? Because the whole idea we've tried to do is make a bus as a bus, and it can go out and do its thing all day long. We don't have to deadhead, midday charge, do all of those things. The data that we're going to be capturing in the next couple of months with this testing that's going to be in conjunction with operator training, and we'll be able to solidify, the planning department will be able to use that as they're planning future expansions, because now we'll know what the bus is capable of. We'll know what it can do instead of the back of a napkin sketching things out guess. So we'll have some data-driven decisions, which is exciting.
Yeah, I really look forward to seeing some of the data. Great, thank you.
Director Holmstrom, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So you've probably told me this before, and I don't remember. The charging points at Del Webb, are those level 2 or are those DC fast charging?
Great question. They're DC fast charging, so they're 200 kilowatt.
Okay.
Right now we have a portable 50 kilowatt charger, and I'm just amazed how fast that charges the buses. Everything that we've tried to do, because power is time, and the faster we can charge buses, the quicker the turnaround. Trying to future-proof it, there's lots. This is why I'm so excited about trying to get the data to see what it does. I'm thinking we could maybe get to the point where we only charge the buses to 80%, pull it off, and then charge the next round, so you don't have to keep buying a charger per bus.
Right.
So it's going to really give us some ideas and some directions on how we can work with the infrastructure, the space constraints, the budgetary constraints, and still make everything as fiscally responsible as we can. So yes, DC fast charging, I guess, is
Yeah.
the answer to your question.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the work that you and the staff have done, and all the partners. I mean, it just sounds like it's a fabulous effort, and it's great. I'm going to go down a road now that you may not be able to answer all my questions, and that's okay. Maybe we don't even have any answers, and that's fine. So, 10 buses here, 20 buses, or 20 buses total on the way, with 10 coming on the way. We don't need that many to run Route 11, right?
Correct.
It's probably even fewer than 10, I would think, to run Route 11 every day. So do we know what's next? And I saw there's 3 different, induction chargers going into Kaiser. I suspect that, there could be another route that uses Kaiser Transit Center, and maybe there's an extra capacity there that 11's not using mid-route to support another route. There could be a route that don't need mid-route charging during the day for as you operate that route. And this is what I'm really kind of concerned about, is are there going to be, there will be in the future, we know, more facilities needed, on-route facilities needed, and I'd like to start thinking about that as soon as possible. So I think that's just, and again, maybe that's not, maybe you're thinking about that. I don't know.
Sure, I kind of feel some of that. So Route 11 is going to be currently blocked for 10 buses, so that'll take care of that. Route 11 at any time only uses 1 bay at Kaiser, so the other 2 are always available. And the plan right now is to start electrifying routes that feed into Kaiser, even if that constitutes a little bit of a scheduling change. And in the meantime, your exact point on, are there buses that don't need they could just be charged and operate as a bus without going to Kaiser. And that would be the great thing, is when we have a bus, we can start seeing what that means. But right now the plan is to electrify the routes that are coming in and out of Kaiser. And then there is future plans for South Salem Transit Center to have charging at that location as well that'll expand our ability. There's also, InductEV is doing some testing for essentially a surface mount charger that might have some potential possibility for use at the transit mall without digging into the parking garage, but it'd be on the surface one. It doesn't charge as fast, but there's a lot of potential and things that we're exploring.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I do want to apologize to folks because at the beginning of the meeting, I said we were going to have item, what did I say, D? Item 7D, and I just went straight to 8. So we're going to swing back over here. And I don't know, General Manager Pollock, if you want me to just tee off Director Carney for some more information around this? Yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to do that if that works for this group. All right, thank you, President Hinojosa Pressy. So the item that I asked to have added to the agenda, and I think many of our board members, but maybe not all, are familiar with it. So one of my responsibilities as a board member is as our representative and liaison to the Salem-Keizer Area Transportation Study Policy Committee. And that is for our metropolitan planning area. And there's only a few in the state of Oregon that meet the size requirement to be a metropolitan planning area. We have a policy committee, and it has a bunch of members. They are, for our MPO, it is the general purpose government. So right now we have Marion County, Polk County, Turner, Keizer, the city of Salem. The transit district is a member, and because we're a metropolitan planning area, we're federally required to be a member on our policy committee. We also have an ODOT member and the school board. So we have 8 current members on our MPO. And in the 2020 census, Almsville was added to our census designated urbanized area. And as such, they get brought into the SCATS boundary, so our MPO boundary. And so this MPO is in charge of sort of awarding federal funds for projects that are submitted to the policy committee and judged on a set of criteria that is set by that body, and keeping them sort of in our transportation improvement plan and adjusting costs as necessary and funding them through to completion. Most of what comes through the group, I don't know that it's most, but a lot of what comes through is federal money. There's some local match money, there's some state money. Transit brings in a lot of federal money that gets added to the TIP. We have a lot of, the TIP is our transportation improvement plan. We make a lot of adjustments to the TIP when we have to add 5 new electric buses, for example. So with the addition of Almsville to our census designated urbanized area, we have the opportunity to add Almsville as a member, a voting member to the MPO. But we also have the opportunity to kind of take a step back and look at the voting structure of our MPO policy committee as a whole and say, does this function in a way that best serves the region? Right now, the city of Turner has the same weight in their vote, the same size vote that the city of Salem does. The city of Salem is 165,000 people, and the city of Turner is, gosh, somebody help me, I'd have to pull up the number, but fewer than 5,000?
Yeah, it's like 1,200.
Yeah. And so, especially for these general purpose governments, and I use those words because that's the federal designation for a county government, or in our case here in Oregon, these city governments, these smaller general purpose governments, for all intents and purposes, have a larger vote than the city of Salem, because the city of Salem is trying to represent both a larger land area and a much larger population. Now, does the city of Salem receive the bulk of the funding? Yes, they do. But for comparison, we just actually at the last SCATS meeting at the request of then Vice Chair Lyle Mordhorst, Polk County? No, Turner. he had asked to see how are federal funds obligated and spent for the projects in our region. And the SCATS committee, or the SCATS, excuse me, staff at the Mid-Willamette Valley COG was able to pull together project numbers from 2003 to 2027. And so the city of Salem did receive the largest share of federal funds with 47.2% of all federal funds obligated or programmed going to the city. But then kind of oddly, Kaiser was not in the top two. The next one down is Marion County, which representing 19% of the population in our metropolitan planning area, received 37.3% of the federal funding. So the city of Salem, 47.2, and Marion County, which is just the unincorporated area of Marion County that falls inside the SCATS planning boundary, but outside the city limits, had almost 40% of the federal funds. And so there's an opportunity, and the city of Salem is very interested in looking at an adjustment to the voting structure for our policy committee. Many of the smaller general purpose governments, as you can imagine, have no incentive whatsoever to do that. We did agree as a body that a facilitated process led by COG staff to arrive at a more equitable and representative voting structure, which is actually something that is cited in United States Code for guidance on MPOs, would be a beneficial outcome. There hasn't been any movement in that direction. We have seen many letters of support for that from local organizations and residents of the MPO. And those haven't received a ton of recognition in our policy committee meetings. But at our last policy committee meeting, which took place earlier this week, the city of Almsville, or more specifically, their city manager, had submitted a letter. And that letter said, we really think Almsville, I could read it to you in full. It is uses a lot of language that kind of heats me up. But their premise is the city of Almsville ought to get a voting seat on the MPO, and that should be really the only change. And that's what's the most fair, is for the city of Almsville to be added as a 9th seat and for us to have the same vote as everybody else. And the chair of the policy committee said that the policy committee should really consider a letter submitted by a member or potential member of the policy committee, that one of these letters should be held in higher regard than those submitted by the citizens. And the words she used, I believe, even though the city of Almsville did not submit a letter that seemed to me to do this, was we need to pay particular attention to jurisdictional letters that have been approved by governing boards. The city of Almsville's letter did not seem to meet those requirements, but that was what she was using as an example. And so my request of this governing board is that we compose a letter to the SCATS policy committee stating our continued desire to see a more equitable and representative voting structure achieved on the SCATS policy committee. And I think we could take some time in composing it, and I'm happy to lend myself to the effort, and I'm happy to have others join me. And I think that we would have the opportunity to review the letter. I don't know, maybe we can review it at a work session, but then maybe approve it at our next board meeting, which happens to fall. Sometimes the SCATS policy committee meetings fall before a board meeting and sometimes just after. And the month of February is one of those in which our board meeting falls on a Thursday with the SCATS Policy Committee taking place the following Tuesday. So I think we could approve something as a board at a board meeting in February and still have it submitted in time. So that is my not very well planned out proposal to you all. And I'm happy to answer any questions that I can or simply to have a conversation, but I appreciate your consideration on the matter.
Do we have any questions? I mean, I think some board directors might be a little bit more familiar with this topic than others. So if there's anything that we can help make sure that we're all on the same page. No? Yeah, Director Davidson?
Just a comment. In concept, I'm supportive. I, of course, would love to see the language. Also happy to lend my hand to the writing if that's helpful. And yeah, I think a lot of the goals that we have, particularly as adopted today in our policies and priorities, reflect what Director Carney talked about. And so this would just be us putting on additional paper many of the values that we have formally adopted year after year. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? Director Holmstrom?
Yeah, I'd just like to also lend my support, strong support for the concept, and be excited to see a letter to vote on next month. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, Director Navarro?
Yeah, I'd like to support submitting a letter like this. I mean, usually when it comes to systems that don't have an equitable form of voting, it's communities of color that are impacted the most. And so hearing that, Kaiser wasn't up there and getting funds when Kaiser, a third of the populations are Latinos, is really frustrating to hear. Thank you.
Do you have anything?
Well, since everyone else is saying something, my understanding about this issue is that it's been festering for some time now, and that there's been a lot of internal strife. And so, for all the reasons already mentioned, and just for getting that body to a place where we can start making equitable decisions, I would be in favor of that letter.
Okay, so since we did say that this was going to be a modification and added as an action item, I will make a motion to direct General Manager Pollack to work with Director Carney on drafting a letter to the Salem-Kaiser Area Transportation Study Policy Committee, and then bring that letter back for approval at our February board meeting. You can consider that my birthday present. Because it's not like I haven't already mentioned that the board meeting will be on my birthday. So we have, thank you. Okay, so motion made by me, seconded by Director Davidson. Any discussion on the matter? Director Carney?
I just want to thank you for your support in this matter, and also note, and this is just like one of those little thorns in my side, that the cooperative agreement, which is what would require updating if we were to update the voting structure for the policy committee, says in the document that was adopted in 1987 that it will be, gosh, I have it open here somewhere, it will be revised like every 2 years, every 5 years, and it's never been revised once, except to add the city of Turner, and then all they did was add the city of Turner. They've never revised the document that they commit to revising and use as their guiding document. And that kind of frustrates me, because I think that government should adhere to the standards they set for themselves. And so I'll be very excited if we're able to get this updated. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Carney. Any other comments on the matter? No? All right, so all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And that will bring us back on track to our general manager's report.
Thank you. I just have a couple of quick items. First, I'd like to reiterate the comments heard earlier from Chief Dietz about our winter disruption. It truly takes a team effort. We had folks out there preparing facilities for service, preparing buses for service, putting on chains, people driving around the service area, assessing road conditions, which was pretty dangerous in and of itself. We had people answering hundreds of calls, trying to find out what was going on. We had dispatchers preparing work. We had people coordinating with other entities, like the City of Salem. We had people checking on weather conditions from National Weather Reports. And it was also payday week, by the way, and we had folks coming in to make sure payday occurred, so everyone was able to get paid on time, which was a pretty important event that week. So I just want to thank the whole Cherriots team for the work they did. It's, in times of adversity like this where you really see everyone step up and do what needs to be done, and Cherriots did that in this case. I've also, last week and this week, and we'll continue into next week, meeting with our local state delegation to prepare them for the short session and discuss Cherriots' requests and issues and updating them on a variety of factors that are important to us. And just to close, if you haven't seen, Mayor Hoy announced his State of the City address coming up on March 20th. So as we get more details on that, we'll be sure to see which members of the board would like to attend that event, which I believe will be at the conference center. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And so that moves us into board director reports. And I'm going to start over with Director Navarro.
Thank you. I just have a comment. I want to commend Team Cherriots on an awesome response to the storm that we just had. I think that we learned a lot from a couple years ago when we had a really crazy ice storm and everybody was kind of trying to fend for themselves. A lot of folks this time, I think, took the recommendations to heart and stayed home and stayed safe. Thank you, General Manager Pollock, for being quick to correct some misinformation that was in the community around services for Cherriots. I think a lot of people were kind of relying on service because they had heard, a couple things getting to the shelters, the warming shelters, and that was quickly corrected, and people were able to get to some safe spaces to wait out the storm. So, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Director Holmstrom?
I don't have anything to add this month, but I'll also reiterate my thanks to the staff and everyone for all the the difficult time over the last week and a half or so, and all the hard work the staff put in for our community. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Director Carney?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Pressy. Also, huge kudos to Cherriots and their staff on their sort of behavior and participation in and navigation of the weather event. I kept joking with folks that it was like the Gilligan's Island version of a 3-day weekend. Like school was closed for one day and then it was closed forever. But I tried to open up the sliders on my minivan and just gave up because they were frozen shut. But the car didn't give up and my battery went dead. And then I had some appointments to keep in town, downtown on Thursday, and realized that my car battery was dead. And I'm telling you, I wasn't even late because the bus picked me up and brought me there just as quickly. And I didn't have to look for parking. And I was so appreciative to the driver. It really is fantastic. So thank you for the service that you provide and that we get to enjoy. I do have a slightly longer report. We talked a lot about the legislative subcommittee earlier, and I just want to let all of our board members know that it's myself as chair and Director Davidson and Navarro, and I'm sure that any of the three of us, but I especially am happy to answer questions, and I will be providing updates at our board meetings on what's going on. And I really appreciated the robust discussion earlier this evening, particularly around transit safety and community safety. And I think that's something that I'm very appreciative that this group takes so seriously. And I want you to know that we will be paying attention to that. So I appreciate you raising the concerns that you did. We did have a meeting of the SCATS Policy Committee earlier this week on Tuesday. January each year is when we have election of officers, and I'm happy to report that Kathy Clark is remaining our chair, and I am our vice chair. So that is exciting. I do love me a policy committee. We did talk about a bunch of projects. I mentioned one earlier, which is a signal updates in South Salem. They're going to update these boxes that talk to the pedestrian signals and the traffic lights. It will enable transit signal priority along the commercial corridor at some point if we are able to extend that project to that space. And these new updates, I wish Director Duncan were there. I think she'd be happy to hear this, though she heard it at SCATS. But they're particularly useful for pedestrian safety, and they can make a lot of enhancements in that direction. We're also in the process of updating our unified planning work program, which is something we do every year. We have kind of one more chance to revise it and submit comments through the weekend. I have made a few additional comments that I'm going to submit to SCATS, or excuse me, COG staff or SCAT staff. They then submit it to ODOT and the Federal Highway Administration for approval. I talked a little bit earlier too about the federal obligations that are received. And I do just want to give a shout out to kind of our jurisdictional partners as well as transit. One thing that we learned at the policy committee is when federal money comes in, if you're not spending it in a timely fashion, kind of goes back into a big bucket. And then if you are like a qualifying entity, which we happen to be, you get that large S. You get that like money that went back in the bucket because other people weren't able to spend it because they weren't very organized. You get these redistribution funds. And we have been fortunate enough to qualify for these redistribution funds. And I think it's something to do with our spending it in a timely fashion and ODOT's work. But we do receive quite a bit of additional federal funding in that regard. So it's really a commendment of like the work that is done at a local level to get these transportation projects in place. So for everybody that's involved in that, I think we owe our thanks. And yeah, I think at the next meeting, which is in February, we've had this on the agenda before. Hopefully this is the last time that we will be discussing with our partners in the MPO, the voting structure for the policy committee moving forward. We've had a difficult time getting the right people in attendance. And there are some people whose attendance is deemed critical. But we're hopeful that the stars will align in February and that we will be able to come back to the board with an update in that regard. And I did also want to say that in those federal funds obligated, transit has received in that 2003 to 2027, and I think it's probably a smaller amount of time from that. I would have to look at this spreadsheet, but $22.3 million in federal funds, which doesn't quite line up with CFM's number, I noticed, but it's what's in my notes from the SCATS meeting. And we also are recipients of the largest federal fund grant allocation on the entire sheet, which is $7.9 million for battery electric buses. So good job, transit. And that's it. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Davidson?
Keeping me on my toes. I appreciate that. So, got a few reports to make. So, immediately prior to our last board meeting, the Service Enhancement Committee met. It was our first meeting. I serve on that committee along with Director Holmstrom, Director Novato. And it was a kickoff meeting, so we didn't make any decisions, but it's a very important kickoff meeting. This was an opportunity for us to talk about at a very high level what we wanted to get done, some of the obstacles that we foresaw, and most importantly, what the plan of attack was. And so I'd like to just take a moment to identify the different focus areas and staff leads for each of these focus areas. So our general manager, Alan Pollock, will be the overall project manager for this. He'll also be providing legal, legislative, and policy. He'll be in charge of those areas. Our Chief Planning and Development Officer, Azum, will be providing service enhancement plan. He'll be in charge of that. Our Chief Communication Officer, Feeney, will be in charge of, as you might imagine, the communication plan. Chief Financial Officer, LaRue, will focus on the revenue and the financial plan. And then Chief Human Resource Officer, Rose, is in charge of the staffing plan, because with all of this plan service enhancement, of course, that there are this touches all parts of the organization. And so I do want to acknowledge how much work this will be. This is incredibly exciting work, especially as me as a board member who doesn't have to do this work. But I want to acknowledge that this is a lot of work. And we will have our next meeting next month, and so we'll have more to report on then. But this will be an ongoing process that will take some time. Last month, myself and President Hinojosa Pressy, we had an opportunity to meet with Congresswoman Salinas, and I just want to publicly acknowledge that her support at the congressional level is, I was going to say invaluable, but I think I can actually put a dollar amount to it. But the 5 battery electric buses that are coming, as our CFM advocates noted, was in no small part because of her advocacy, which as a freshman legislator is remarkable. And so seeing those roll out into service in likely 2025 will be phenomenal. I also had an opportunity to attend the Cherriots holiday luncheon. Always a great opportunity to sit down with Cherriot staff, talk. I also love seeing these giant TV screens being repurposed to holiday cozy vibes. Just wonderful. So over at the Council of Governments, we had a meeting at the end of December, and I was honored to be elected as the incoming chair of the Council of Governments. Thank you. I will, I guess, formally assume the role as chair at the Council of Governments annual dinner. And as the name implies, this is an annual opportunity for the Council of Governments to meet, do an annual review, and also to just gather together to meet, talk about our shared priorities. And so this year it will be on February 28th at 6 p.m. The Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde is hosting us at Spirit Mountain. So if you're able to attend, I would invite you to attend. Clerk of the Board, Kira Pressy, has sent over an email with details on how to attend. She can help you with that. And so love to have you there. Speaking of COG, the Council of Governments, they have a few shared legislative priorities that we do as well. The WES, so the Regional Rail Bill. As of, I think, 5 days ago, there are 22 legislative co-sponsors to that bill. So momentum is growing, which is exciting. There's bipartisan support as well as bicameral support. It is a short session, and it is the legislature. It is a rather mercurial beast, so I think continued advocacy will be important. The support is pretty broad. Municipal governments up and down the corridor are in support of that, as is the railroad, which is significant. That's a new addition this year. And then organizations like Thousand Friends of Oregon, Aorta, they're in support. So not counting the chickens before they hatch, but I'm optimistic that we can get this passed. To the conversation earlier about the role of transit as we think about tolling, certainly in the metro area, it's critically important that we have robust, rapid, and reliable transit that spans different commuting watersheds or commute sheds, excuse me, and a train that runs every hour up and down the valley 19 or 20 hours a day would really do that. But first step first, we gotta get funding for a study, so. The other thing that is a goal of ours that we share in our legislative agenda is property tax reform. The COG will be in probably next month, starting to do some information or some learning on property tax reform, inviting different speakers to attend the legislative committee. So if you are interested, you're welcome to attend. We meet every other Wednesday at 7 a.m. It's a jolly and chipper time if you're able to attend. And then I did want to speak to what Director Carney mentioned about on South Commercial with the upgrades, the ITS upgrades, with the signals. I think that there is in particular an opportunity to maybe do a queue jump at Madrona and Commercial with the signal upgrades. The city's already planning on doing that. I think there's the infrastructure there, there's a turn lane, I think there's an opportunity there. But most interestingly, I think that there will be support from one and potentially two neighborhood associations in that area to support that. And so to the extent that we can tap into that support that's growing there for these kinds of interventions, I would be supportive of that. There are also, as the city makes investments in South Commercial, but other parts of the city, I think it's a good opportunity for us to reconsider where our bus stops are. So in that similar neck of the wood, we might want to shift a little further south so we are closer to the rectangular rapid flashing beacon that's going in near Triangle Drive. And so I expect that this is happening, but just wanted to publicly say that I hope that we're taking every opportunity to look at what the city is doing as the owner of the right of way to see how we can also see some synergies there. And then the last thing, I also, like others, wanted to express my gratitude to Cherriots staff, and as General Manager Pollock mentioned, this was a up and down throughout the organization kind of thing, but in particular, I want to express gratitude for operations, maintenance, and for the transit operators. I saw the number 4 bus roll through my neighborhood when it was icy and snowy, and it just put a smile on my face, and I didn't have anywhere to go. For the people that needed to go somewhere, I can imagine that the smile was even bigger. I am particularly interested in maybe getting a high-level report on the after-action report. In my capacity as board member, I don't necessarily need to know all of the particulars of the after-action report, but if there are additional resources that are needed to be able to help us better respond to a future situation, I want to know that. I want to be able to be equipped to provide those resources if I can, so we can respond better. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Director Laura Midkiff.
When growing up, I used to hate the word competent because I thought it had like an air or a ring of condescension to it. I just thought, oh, competent. And so often, that's the most we can say about our public services, is that they are at most competent. And I think in my short time here, whether it's financial transparency or engineering happening at KTC or evidence, the week of the ice storms, I'm just blown away with the excellence embodied by the work that every single person here does, including, by the way, the colleagues of the board and especially the staff. And what a blessing you all are to this community. So thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you do every day, delivering really essential, and as we were reminded, life-saving services to folks. So thank you for that. It was a good way to start the year in some ways, to have that be such a reminder for us. On a more lighthearted note, I took the bus for the first time to Woodburn on what is that, 10? The express one is 80X. Is it 80 or 10?
ADX?
10X, yeah. And it was just, it wasn't a lot of people on the bus, but it was fun, and it was a beautiful ride. I'd never taken it before, so I thought that was worth sharing. I read some Cormac McCarthy, for those who know who that is an American novelist. I was reading him, and I was like, this is awesome. Kind of a lighthearted thing, but mostly, thank you for the work that you do, and I would also be interested in knowing about that. What did you say it was? After action report?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it for me.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And on my end, I will be providing the DEI subcommittee report since Director Duncan is at Disneyland. I'm not at all salty about that. Okay, so the DEI subcommittee, which is comprised of myself, Director Duncan, Director Laura Midkiff, and Director Duncan is our chair, met on January 2nd. We reviewed the Heritage and Transit Plan and a draft version of our Black History Month bus wrap. And we also received a briefing from our Chief Human Resources Officer, which abbreviates to CHRO, which just makes me think of chiropractor. So our Chief Human Resources Officer, Rose, on the recently completed in-service DEI training session, which has set the stage for implementing our employee DEI committee. And Chief Human Resources Officer Rose also shared about an exciting program we are planning to offer later this year in partnership with Chemeketa Community College, which is a 6-week course to guide our internal DEI champions. And the subcommittee has established a meeting schedule for the first Friday of each month. And then the other thing that I did want to highlight is that I know that we just recognized our Community Advisory Committee members, and I know that a few meetings back of that advisory committee, I popped into them to tell them that I'm really going to need their support for our service enhancement project. And so I would like for our board liaison to that advisory committee, Director Holmstrom, and our general manager, Alan Pollock, to work together to update our bylaws, just to make sure that we can utilize our committee in the best capacity in supporting this effort. And I think that concludes my report. Our next meeting is going to be when? On my birthday. So that's Thursday, February 22nd. I'll be 29.
What cake do you want?
And it is now 8:04, and our meeting is adjourned.
Come on. So what is lechas, mi locas?